Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The rain fell in steady sheets over the city, each droplet striking the patrol car's windshield like impatient fingers. Officer Marcus Vaynar adjusted the wipers, his eyes scanning the empty streets. It was a slow night. No pedestrians, no traffic, just the occasional flicker of a neon sign reflected in the puddles along the curb. His radio crackled with static, the usual background noise of late-night patrols. He sipped cold coffee from a paper cup, glancing at the framed photo clipped to the visor. His son, Adrian Vaynar, smiling, one arm thrown casually around his father's shoulders. The boy was 19, bright, sharp-witted, always teasing Marcus about his stern cop face. Marcus let out a small sigh. The patrol was dull, but dull meant safe. Dull meant Adrian would keep living in a city where nothing could touch him. Then the radio broke the silence. Unit 12, come in. Marcus, pick up. The voice belonged to Detective Rowan Kalin. It wasn't his usual steady tone. It was thin, strained, trembling. Marcus frowned, reaching for the receiver. This is Unit 12. Rowan, what's going on? There was a pause. Only the hiss of static, as if Rowan had pulled the radio too close and didn't know what to say next. Finally, his voice came through, low and almost reluctant. Marcus, you need to get to the morgue. Marcus's heart skipped. His grip tightened on the receiver until his knuckles whitened. The morgue? Why? What's happened? Rowan's next words came out like a death sentence. It's Adrian. The world seemed to tilt. Marcus pressed the brakes without realizing it, the patrol car skidding slightly as the rain-soaked tires protested. He shook his head, as if the movement could erase what he had just heard. No, Rowan, no. Tell me you're wrong. But Rowan didn't answer immediately. His breath rattled through the line, shallow, uneasy. Finally, he said the words Marcus would never forget. He's in the morgue, Marcus. He was stabbed. The paper cup fell from Marcus's hand, splattering cold coffee across the floor mat. His mind went blank, flooded only by a single image. Adrian lying somewhere cold and alone. He forced his voice to stay steady, though it cracked on the edges. Ooh, there was another long pause. When Rowan spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost a whisper. I'll explain when you get here. Just hurry. And, Marcus, Rowan hesitated, then added, I shouldn't even be telling you this. The line went dead. Marcus sat frozen in the driver's seat, his chest heaving as if the air had thickened around him. The rain outside pounded harder, drowning the city in sound. But inside the car, there was only silence. His training told him to stay calm, to wait for details, to handle this like any other call. But this wasn't any other call. This was his son, Adrian. His hands trembled as he restarted the engine, headlights cutting through the storm. He pressed down on the accelerator, the patrol car roaring forward into the empty streets. Street lights blurred past, golden streaks against the black night. His jaw locked tight, his eyes burned, but he didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. At each intersection, memories rushed in to fill the silence. Adrian's laugh when Marcus tried to cook pancakes. The boy's proud smile when he got accepted to college. The last time Marcus saw him, leaving the house with friends, tossing a casual, "Don't wait up, Dad." Marcus's chest ached as if the words themselves had become knives. Don't wait up. And now Rowan was telling him Adrian was in the morgue. Stabbed. The city blurred by, but Marcus barely noticed. He felt every second stretch, each red light mocking him. By the time the morgue's dull brick building came into view, the night had turned heavier, the rain soaking through his uniform as soon as he stepped out. He pushed through the glass doors, his boots echoing against the linoleum. The sterile scent of disinfectant and something colder, sharper, filled his lungs. The coroner looked up, his face stiff with pity. And behind him stood Rowan Kalin, trench coat damp, tie loosened, eyes darting like a man who'd seen too much. Marcus's voice was hoarse, nearly broken. "Show me my son." The coroner hesitated, then slowly drew back the sheet. Adrian lay still, pale under the fluorescent light, his face frozen in a quiet expression that felt wrong. Too calm, too final. Marcus's breath caught, his knees threatening to give way. Rowan stepped closer, his voice low, urgent, trembling. It wasn't random, Marcus. It was the mayor's son, Julian Dreven. The words hit harder than the rain outside. And just like that, Marcus's grief ignited into rage. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, flickering as if even the morgue resisted what it had to reveal. Marcus Vaynar stood frozen, his eyes locked on his son's still face. Adrian looked almost asleep, except for the faint bruising near his chest, where the blade had taken his life. The coroner stepped back quietly, leaving Marcus and Detective Rowan Kalin alone. Rowan's face was pale, his jaw tight, but his eyes betrayed something deeper, a mixture of fear and hesitation, like a man caught between duty and survival. Marcus clenched his fists at his sides. His voice, when it came, was gravel in his throat. Say it again. Rowan swallowed hard, lowering his voice to a whisper, though no one else was in the room. It was Julian Dreven, the mayor's son. He'd lost a bet with Adrian. When your boy refused to cover his loss, Julian snapped. Pulled a knife. Marcus's chest rose sharply, his breath heavy. You're telling me the mayor's son stabbed my boy over a bet? Rowan's eyes darted to the door as if the walls themselves had ears. Yes, and it doesn't end there. Mayor Corvin Dreven ordered the report shredded, told the chief this case never happened. Marcus stepped closer, his jaw trembling. You're telling me my son's life was erased? Just like that. Rowan nodded quickly, his voice urgent now, pleading almost. Marcus, listen to me. If I know I told you, I'll be next. They want this buried, deeper than any grave. The words hung heavy in the cold air. Marcus turned back to Adrian's body, his throat tightening as memories collided with the reality before him. His son, who had once begged him to teach him how to drive, who laughed so hard he spilled soda across the couch, who had promised to make him proud, reduced to a statistic that no one would ever read. His badge suddenly felt like lead on his chest. He had sworn to uphold the law, to protect the innocent. But how could he protect justice itself when the mayor owned it, when power dictated truth? Rowan placed a hand lightly on Marcus's shoulder, his voice almost breaking. I shouldn't even be here. I shouldn't be telling you this. But I couldn't let you live without knowing. Marcus turned, locking eyes with him. Rowan's gaze flickered, nervous, unsettled. But Marcus was too consumed by grief and rage to notice the cracks in his colleague's performance. What about the evidence? Marcus asked sharply. There has to be something. Cameras, witnesses, reports. Rowan shook his head quickly. Gone. Every file, every statement. The mayor's people swept through the department like a storm. I tried to hold on to one report, but it vanished from my desk overnight. Marcus exhaled sharply, his teeth grinding. So what do you expect me to do, Rowan? Just stand here? Go to my son's funeral and watch that boy live his life like nothing happened? Rowan's hand tightened briefly on his shoulder, then pulled away. I expect you to survive. That's all I can tell you. The detective's words, meant as a warning, landed like an insult. Survive? Marcus wasn't surviving. He was breaking. His son was dead, and the city was telling him to bury the truth with him. Marcus's hands trembled as he leaned on the cold steel of the autopsy table. His voice came out as a low, guttural vow. I don't care what the mayor ordered. I don't care who's protecting his son. Adrian's blood won't just vanish into their lies. Rowan stepped back, his expression tightening. Marcus! But Marcus didn't wait for the rest. He stormed out of the morgue, his boots echoing in the hallway. Outside, the rain had turned heavier, slamming against the pavement in sheets. He leaned against his car, breathing hard, staring up at the dark city skyline. Somewhere out there, Julian Dreven was sleeping soundly, untouched, while Adrian lay on a steel slab. Marcus's hands found his sidearm at his hip. He gripped it tightly, his reflection staring back in the rain-streaked window of his cruiser. For years, he had trusted the system. For years, he believed justice would prevail. But tonight, staring at his son's lifeless face and listening to Rowan's whispered truths, something inside him shifted. He wasn't going to Adrian's funeral as a grieving father. He was going as a soldier with a target. The storm outside raged, but inside Marcus, the storm was only beginning. The precinct smelled faintly of burnt coffee and wet uniforms as Marcus Vaynar walked through the doors. It should have felt like home. He had spent more nights here than in his own house, but tonight it felt like enemy ground. Every step echoed in the hallway. Each face that glanced his way, turning quickly, as though his grief were contagious. He went straight to the records room. The fluorescent lights flickered as he slid open the steel cabinet drawers, searching for Adrian's name. Nothing. Not a single file. Not even a placeholder. His hands trembled as he pulled open another drawer, then another, empty of everything he needed. Marcus! The voice behind him was soft. Officer Leah Marston, a young patrol officer, stood in the doorway. Her expression was tense, her eyes darting like she was afraid of being seen with him. "You won't find it," she whispered. "They cleared it all out this morning." Marcus froze. "They?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. Mayor Dreven's people. They walked in with orders. Chief signed off. No one argued. His chest tightened. So everyone just let it happen. Leah's throat bobbed. She lowered her voice to almost nothing. "Marcus, people have families. Mortgages. We can't fight City Hall. And if you keep digging, you'll end up like..." She cut herself off, biting her lip. "Like who?" Marcus pressed, his voice sharp. Leah shook her head quickly. "Forget I said anything." She glanced down the hall, then back at him. "Please, Marcus. For your own sake. Stop." She left before he could say another word. Marcus slammed the drawer shut, the metal clattering through the silent room. His knuckles turned white against the steel. Every word Leah had said stung, not just because of her fear, but because he could feel it spreading through the entire department. His colleagues weren't allies anymore. They were shadows hiding from the truth. He stalked into the main office, eyes blazing. Officers at their desks stiffened when they saw him. Some lowered their gazes, typing furiously at keyboards just to avoid looking at him. Others shuffled papers with exaggerated focus. The silence was deafening. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice carrying across the room. "My son is dead, stabbed in the street, and you're all pretending it never happened." No one responded. Chairs creaked, pens scratched on paper, but no voices rose. The weight of their silence pressed down on him until he could barely breathe. Rowan Kalin appeared from his office, his trench coat draped over his arm, his expression carefully composed. He strode toward Marcus, lowering his voice but keeping his hand on Marcus's arm as though guiding him away from watching eyes. "Marcus, don't do this here." Marcus yanked his arm free. "Why not?" "Because they might hear the truth." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Because they already know, and they've chosen silence. The mayor owns this building. He owns all of us, whether we like it or not." Marcus's voice cracked with rage. "Then what good are we? What good is the badge if we just bend our necks when he says so?" Rowan's eyes flickered, just for a moment, with something Marcus couldn't place. Fear, guilt, maybe both. Then he leaned in, his whisper urgent. "I warned you. They're not just covering Julian's tracks. They'll come for anyone who stands in the way. Even you." Marcus stared at him, chest heaving. He could smell Rowan's cologne mixed with the faint scent of rain still clinging to his coat. His partner, his friend of 10 years, was telling him to stop fighting for his son. And yet, something in Rowan's eyes didn't match his words. The tremor in his hand, the way he avoided holding Marcus's gaze, it was as though he was hiding something more. Marcus lowered his voice, almost a growl. "You're not telling me everything." Rowan flinched but masked it quickly. "You know enough. Walk away before this city swallows you whole." He turned and walked out, leaving Marcus standing in the center of the precinct, surrounded by colleagues who refused to meet his eyes. Marcus's throat burned. His grief had been raw, but now it hardened into something colder, sharper. He thought of Adrian, his laughter, his stubborn grin, the promise in his eyes, and he realized something with bone-deep certainty. If the city had chosen silence, then he would become the noise they couldn't ignore. As he walked back into the rain, one thought echoed in his mind, louder than the storm. He wasn't just fighting Julian Dreven. He was fighting every lie this city had built to protect him. The storm hadn't let up. By the time Marcus Vaynar pulled his cruiser into his driveway, rain had soaked through his uniform, clinging to his skin like ice. The house was dark except for the faint glow from the kitchen window. Inside, the silence was unbearable. He hung his coat on the chair, dropped his badge on the counter, and stared at the photograph on the fridge, Adrian grinning, holding up his college acceptance letter. For the first time, Marcus let the tears fall. His chest heaved, the weight of the morgue's cold steel pressing down on him all over again. But grief didn't last long. Grief turned to fire. He slammed his fist against the counter, the sound echoing through the empty house. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't rest. He needed answers. At 3 a.m., Marcus drove to the bar where Adrian had been last seen. The neon signs flickered weakly against the wet pavement. Inside, the place was nearly empty, just a bartender wiping glasses and a drunk asleep in a booth. Marcus flashed his badge. I need to ask about what happened here last night. My son, Adrian Vaynar. The bartender froze mid-wipe. His eyes darted to the door, then back at Marcus. His voice was low, guarded. I don't know anything. Marcus slammed his hand on the bar, rattling the glasses. You're lying. You saw something. Say it. The bartender swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Look, I didn't see much, but I heard shouting in the alley. A fight, then a scream. When I went out, there were black SUVs parked there. Men in suits. One of them shoved me back inside. Told me to forget it. Marcus leaned in. Did you see Julian Dreven? The bartender's lips tightened. He hesitated, then nodded once, quickly. Yeah, him. And another guy. I don't know his name. Tall, dark coat, short hair. Looked like a cop. Marcus froze. His pulse hammered in his ears. What did you just say? The bartender looked away. I don't want trouble. Marcus grabbed his wrist, forcing him to meet his eyes. Say it. The man whispered, almost trembling. He looked like a cop. I swear. Marcus's grip loosened. The image crashed into his mind. Rowan's damp trench coat, his darting eyes, his trembling voice. A cop. With Julian. In the alley. He stepped back, his body shaking, but the bartender quickly raised his hands. That's all I know. Please don't bring me into this. Marcus left without another word. The rain hit his face like shards of glass as he stepped into the night. He climbed back into his cruiser, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Rowan had told him Adrian was stabbed by Julian. Rowan had whispered that the mayor shredded the files. Rowan had said he was risking everything by telling him the truth. But what if Rowan wasn't telling the whole story? Marcus's thoughts spiraled as the wipers beat back the rain. He replayed every word Rowan had said, every nervous glance, every trembling hesitation. It hadn't felt like courage. It felt like guilt. By the time Marcus reached his house again, dawn was breaking, the gray light spilling over the street like a tired sigh. He sat in the car, staring at the front door, unable to move. Exhaustion pulled at him, but rage kept him awake. When he finally dragged himself inside, he found his phone buzzing on the counter. No number, just a text. You're looking the right place. Check your dash cam. Marcus's breath caught. His eyes shot toward his cruiser parked in the driveway, the faint red light of the dash cam still blinking. Someone out there wanted him to see something. His grief deepened into something darker, heavier. For the first time, Marcus realized the fight wasn't just against Julian Dreven. There was something much bigger, and someone much closer, tangled in Adrian's death. The storm outside began to clear, but inside Marcus, a new storm was rising. The morning sky was pale gray, heavy with clouds, as Marcus Vaynar sat at his kitchen table with a dashcam chip in his hand. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. The anonymous text still glowed on his phone screen. Check your dashcam. He had stared at those words for nearly an hour, debating whether this was a trap. But deep inside, something told him it was the only lead he had. His hands shook as he slid the chip into his laptop. The screen flickered, static at first, before grainy footage appeared. The angle was fixed from his cruiser's dash, pointed toward the alley beside the bar, where Adrian had been last seen. At first, the video showed nothing but empty pavement glistening under streetlights. Then movement. A group of figures stumbled into frame. Marcus leaned closer. He recognized Adrian immediately, his son's profile illuminated under the weak light. Adrian's hands were raised, defensive, his lips moving. Marcus could almost imagine him saying something sharp, stubborn, like he always did when he refused to be pushed around. Across from him was Julian Dreven, the mayor's son. His expensive jacket was soaked in rain, his gestures erratic, his face twisted with arrogance. Even through the blurry footage, Marcus could see his rage. Julian shoved Adrian against the wall, shouting. Adrian shoved him back. The scuffle escalated fast. Julian reached into his coat. A knife flashed under the streetlight. Marcus's heart hammered, his breath catching in his throat. He wanted to scream at the screen, to grab his son, to stop what he knew was coming. But then, something else. Another figure stepped into frame. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark trench coat. Marcus's blood ran cold. The man grabbed Adrian's arm, twisting it behind his back, holding him still. The camera didn't catch his face clearly. The rain streaked across the lens, blurring the details. But Marcus felt his gut tighten. The build, the coat, the stance, it was unmistakable. It looked like Rowan Kalin. Julian lunged forward with the knife. Adrian's body jerked as the blade struck. The sound wasn't there, but Marcus imagined it anyway. The sharp gasp, the last breath, the silence that followed. Marcus's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he shot up, fists slamming on the table. His laptop rattled. He wanted to rip the screen apart. He wanted to rip the truth out of Rowan's throat. But the footage wasn't perfect. The man in the trench coat turned slightly, his face obscured by shadows. The camera glitched for a moment, static cutting across the frame. When the picture cleared again, Adrian was on the ground, Julian standing over him, the other figure gone. Marcus rewound the footage again and again. Each time, the outline looked more like Rowan. Each time, his stomach sank deeper. But the lack of a clear face gnawed at him. He shut the laptop, pressing his palms hard against his eyes. His mind raced. Rowan had told him he was risking his life just by speaking the mayor's name. Rowan had said he tried to keep one report, but it vanished. Rowan had told him to walk away. Now, here was a trench-coated man holding Adrian still as Julian stabbed him. Coincidence? Or betrayal? Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message. No name. No number. You're close. Don't trust anyone. His chest heaved. His instinct screamed that the truth was right in front of him, but every piece felt like it was just out of reach. He slammed his fist on the table again, rage coursing through him. If it was Rowan, then Marcus had been confiding in his son's killer. If it wasn't Rowan, then someone wanted him to believe it was. Either way, the walls were closing in. Marcus grabbed his coat, holstered his weapon, and stormed toward the door. The precinct wasn't a place for allies anymore, but he needed answers. And the first man he would look in the eye was Rowan Kalin. The storm outside had quieted, but Marcus knew the real storm was waiting for him inside the department. The precinct felt colder than usual when Marcus Vaynar pushed through its glass doors. The fluorescent lights hummed above, but the air was thick, heavy, like the building itself knew what he had just seen on the dash cam. Every step Marcus took echoed too loudly, drawing eyes that quickly darted away. Rowan Kalin's office door was ajar. The detective sat inside, sleeves rolled up, files spread across his desk. When he looked up and saw Marcus in the doorway, his expression froze for just a fraction of a second, long enough for Marcus to notice. Marcus, Rowan said carefully, leaning back in his chair. You look like hell. Marcus stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit. His voice was low, edged with steel. I checked my dash cam. Rowan's brow furrowed slightly, though his eyes flicked to the side before returning to Marcus. What do you mean? Marcus took a step closer, fists clenched at his sides. It caught something. An alley. Adrian, Julian, and someone else. Someone in a trench coat holding my boy down while Julian stabbed him. For the first time, Rowan's mask cracked. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. That footage, you still had it? His tone wasn't shock at what Marcus had seen. It was shocked that the footage even existed. Marcus's jaw tightened. You told me everything was shredded. Erased. But it wasn't, was it? Rowan stood slowly, adjusting his coat, his face schooled into calm. But Marcus caught the way his fingers twitched against the desk. Marcus, you're grieving. You're seeing shadows where there aren't any. Dashcam footage in the rain? It could have been anyone. You can't trust it. Marcus slammed his hands down on the desk, the files scattering. Don't play me, Rowan. I've known you 10 years. I know how you move, how you stand. That was you in the alley. For a moment, silence. The only sound was Marcus's ragged breathing. Rowan stared at him, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, Rowan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Be careful what you accuse me of. Words like that, they can get you killed. The threat was quiet, almost gentle, but it hit Marcus harder than a shout. His chest tightened, his fury sparking hotter. Are you threatening me now? Rowan straightened his tie, his calm returning like a mask sliding back into place. I'm telling you the truth, Marcus. You're walking on ground that's already collapsing. The mayor's people are watching. They know you're digging. You keep pressing, you won't just lose your badge, you'll lose your life. Marcus's teeth ground together. He wanted to drag Rowan across the desk, force the confession out of him. But another thought burned at the back of his mind. If Rowan really was involved, then he wasn't just a liar. He was dangerous. Rowan moved around the desk, lowering his voice further as he passed Marcus on the way to the door. Do yourself a favor. Let this go. Bury Adrian like a father. Don't bury yourself next to him. Then he left, his footsteps calm and steady, as though nothing had been said at all. Marcus remained in the office, his heart pounding, his knuckles white from gripping the desk. The dashcam footage replayed in his head on a loop. Adrian struggling, Julian's knife, the shadow of a trench coat. Rowan's trench coat. And yet, the man had stood in front of him and denied it with a calmness that chilled Marcus's blood. As he walked back out into the bullpen, the silence of his colleagues pressed down harder than ever. They avoided his eyes, typing, scribbling, pretending to work. He realized with a sinking weight in his chest. They weren't just afraid of the mayor. They were afraid of Rowan too. Marcus stepped into the rain outside, the storm clouds still heavy above. His rage boiled hotter with every breath. If Rowan thought fear would silence him, he didn't know Marcus at all. Marcus wasn't going to bury Adrian quietly. He was going to unearth every lie, even if it killed him. The city didn't look the same anymore. Every streetlight seemed to flicker too long. Every car that slowed near Marcus Vaynar's home lingered just a little too much. Even inside his house, the silence felt wrong, heavy, as if someone else's breath lived in the walls. Marcus sat in his living room with the curtains drawn, his service weapon resting on the table. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. The dashcam footage played in his mind on repeat. Adrian's last moments, Julian's knife, the trench-coated figure pinning him down. Rowan Kalen's words echoed in the background. Be careful what you accuse me of. Words like that can get you killed. Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew a threat when he heard one. The first sign came the next morning. When he stepped outside to retrieve the mail, he noticed the car parked across the street. A black sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't a neighbor's. The engine was running, but no one got out. Marcus stared at it for nearly a minute before it slowly pulled away. By noon, 2 more cars had passed. The same tinted windows, the same unmarked feel. By evening, Marcus's phone buzzed with a block number. He answered. Nothing. Just silence. Then a click, and the line went dead. They were watching him, testing his patience, letting him know they could reach him anytime. That night, Marcus drove to the precinct to clear his head. But as soon as he walked in, the atmosphere was suffocating. Conversations died as he entered. Officers avoided his gaze, some slipping quietly out of rooms rather than face him. He stopped at Officer Leah Marston's desk. Her face went pale the moment she saw him. Leah, you were at the records room that night. Tell me again, who cleared out the files? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes flicked nervously toward Rowan's office. I can't, Marcus. He leaned closer, his voice sharp but quiet. You already told me it was the mayor's people. But who let them in? Was it the chief? Was it Rowan? Leah shook her head frantically, whispering through clenched teeth. Stop asking. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to get us all killed." She stood so quickly her chair toppled over, then hurried down the hall, leaving Marcus in silence once again. He turned, and that was when he saw Rowan watching him from across the bullpen. The detective leaned casually in the doorway, arms folded, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched, like a man who already knew he was winning. Marcus's stomach churned. He left the precinct before he did something reckless. When he returned home that night, the front door was ajar. He froze, drawing his weapon instantly. The house was dark, the air still. He moved through each room methodically, clearing corners, checking closets. Nothing. But when he reached the kitchen, his blood ran cold. On the counter, where Adrian's framed photo had once stood, the glass was shattered. The picture was gone. Marcus's hands trembled around his gun. He searched the house again. No intruder, no sign of forced entry. Just a missing photo, taken deliberately. His phone buzzed on the table. Another blocked number. He answered with clenched teeth. A man's voice, calm, steady. "We told you to walk away, Marcus." The line went dead. Marcus lowered the phone slowly, his pulse thundering in his ears. They hadn't just been watching him. They had been inside his home. They had touched the one thing he had left of Adrian. He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space on the counter where his son's smile had once lived. Then he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "You think breaking me will make me stop? You have no idea who you're dealing with." The storm outside had returned, thunder rolling in the distance. But Marcus knew the real storm was no longer outside. It was inside him, building, ready to break. The next morning, Marcus Vaynar sat in his cruiser outside the bar where Adrian's life had ended. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still slick, reflecting the weak light of dawn. He had returned because something gnawed at him. The dashcam footage wasn't enough. He needed more. Something undeniable. He got out and circled to the alley. Trash bins lined the brick walls, overflowing with bottles and paper. He crouched down, scanning the ground, his flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. And there it was, faint but unmistakable. A cigarette butt, not unusual, except this one bore a distinct gold band around the filter. Marcus froze. He'd seen that exact brand before. Expensive imports that hardly anyone touched, except Rowan Kalin. Rowan had smoked them for years, never bothering to hide his taste for luxury. Marcus bagged it, his pulse pounding. He knew a cigarette, but wasn't enough to tie Rowan to Adrian's murder, but it was something, a thread he could pull. Back in his cruiser, Marcus plugged into the precinct surveillance database. He shouldn't have been doing it. Every keystroke was logged, but he didn't care anymore. He filtered for traffic cameras near the bar on the night Adrian died. It took an hour, but finally, a blurry image appeared. Marcus leaned closer, his heart hammering. At 11:47 p.m., minutes before the stabbing, a camera had caught a black SUV pulling into the alley. 3 men stepped out. The first was Julian Dreven, his posture arrogant even in grainy footage. The second was one of the mayor's security men. And the third, Marcus's stomach dropped. A man in a trench coat, the camera angle catching just enough of his profile. Short dark hair, square jaw. Rowan Kalin. Marcus slammed his fist against the dashboard, the car rocking under the force. It was no longer suspicion. It was proof. Proof that Rowan hadn't just known. He had been there. He downloaded the footage onto a flash drive, his hands shaking. This was dangerous now. If anyone caught him pulling the file, it could disappear before he even got home. He shoved the drive into his jacket pocket, his mind racing. As he left the lot, headlights flared behind him. A black sedan pulled into his lane, following too close. Marcus's jaw tightened. He took 3 turns, quick and sharp. The sedan followed, each one. His instinct screamed. He floored the accelerator, his cruiser roaring through the wet streets. The sedan matched his speed, keeping up effortlessly. Then, just as suddenly, it peeled away and vanished into a side street. Marcus slowed, his breath ragged. They knew he was getting close. When he finally reached his house, he parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, scanning every shadow. Inside, he locked every door, pulled the blinds, and plugged the flash drive into his laptop. The footage loaded again, Julian, the bodyguard, and Rowan, frozen in the grainy still. Marcus stared at Rowan's face, his rage boiling hotter with every second. The man who had put a hand on his shoulder in the morgue. The man who had whispered that the mayor's son was guilty. The man who told him to walk away. He had been standing in that alley, watching Adrian die. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. You found him. Now decide what you'll do. His grip tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. The decision wasn't hard. He wasn't taking this to internal affairs. He wasn't begging the chief for justice. Rowan Kalin wasn't going to escape behind lies and shredded files. Marcus whispered to himself, his voice calm, steady, final. You murder my son, Rowan, and now I'm coming for you. The flash drive sat on the table like a live grenade. Marcus Vaynar hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. Every time he closed his eyes, the grainy still image of Rowan Kalin stepping out of that SUV burned into his mind. Morning sunlight cut weakly through the blinds. Marcus loaded his weapon, checked his magazines, and placed them neatly beside his badge. He wasn't planning to use the badge anymore. Not for this. But as he zipped up his jacket, a noise outside made him freeze. Engines. Not one. Several. He pulled back the curtain. Black SUVs lined his street, tinted windows reflecting the pale light. Men in suits stepped out, their movements deliberate, coordinated. Marcus's pulse quickened. The Drevens had sent their people. He slipped the flash drive into his boot, grabbed his weapon, and moved to the back door. But before he could leave, heavy knocks thundered against the front. Officer Vaynar, a voice called, calm but firm. We need to speak with you. Marcus didn't answer. He slipped out the back, cutting across the alley, moving fast but quiet. He ducked behind trash bins as two men rounded the corner. He stayed still, breathing through his teeth until they passed. By the time he reached his cruiser, sweat ran cold down his back. He started the engine and sped off, heart pounding. In the rearview mirror, the SUVs turned after him. For 30 minutes, it was a cat-and-mouse chase through the city streets. Marcus cut down alleys, through side streets, even into an underground parking lot. But each time the SUVs appeared again. They weren't trying to stop him. Not yet. They were hurting him. Finally, Marcus pulled into an abandoned warehouse district and killed his lights. He waited, breath tight in his chest. The SUVs slowed at the intersection, scanning, then rolled past. For the first time that morning, Marcus exhaled. But relief was brief. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Silence. Then a voice he recognized. Marcus. Rowan. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. You were there, he growled. I saw you. Rowan's chuckle was soft, almost amused. Careful. Cameras don't always tell the full story. You pinned my boy down. You let Julian kill him. Rowan's tone hardened. And what will you do with that, Marcus? March into the chief's office? File a report? The same chief who signed off when the mayor's people clear the files? You think anyone will believe you over me? Marcus's jaw locked, his silence answering for him. Rowan continued, his voice smooth, poisonous. I told you to bury Adrian. I told you to walk away. But you just couldn't. And now they know. The mayor, the chief, everyone. They won't rest until you're silenced. If you keep pushing, Marcus, you won't just lose your life. They'll paint you as a dirty cop, ruin Adrian's name too. The line clicked dead. Marcus slammed the phone down against the dashboard, fury coursing through him. His world had shrunk into a cage, and Rowan held the key. By nightfall, Marcus returned home to find his door unlocked again. He entered cautiously, weapon raised. The living room was empty, except for something new on the table. Adrian's stolen photograph. Returned. The glass frame replaced, but the photo itself smeared with something red. Blood. Marcus's hand shook as he lifted it, rage flooding every vein in his body. The Drevens were tightening the noose. Rowan was taunting him, leaving trophies like a hunter. But Marcus wasn't prey. He placed the photo carefully back on the table, wiped his hand, and sat down in the dark. His rifle leaned against the wall. The flash drive was still in his boot. He whispered into the silence, each word deliberate, steady. You took my son. You broke into my home. You think you own this city. He chambered around. The metallic click echoed through the house. But tomorrow, Rowan, I take the first piece of it back. The city was restless that night. Neon signs flickered like failing heartbeats, and the streets carried a tension Marcus Vaynar could feel in his bones. He had spent the entire day planning, watching, waiting. The flash drive with the traffic cam footage burned like fire in his pocket. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was done running. At 9 p.m., Marcus parked across from City Hall. The building loomed over the square, its steps glistening under the rain. He knew Julian Dreven was inside, celebrating in some private chamber, untouchable under his father's shadow. And he knew Rowan Kalin wouldn't be far. Marcus walked straight through the front doors, his badge flashing once at the guards. They barely looked at him. Everyone still believed he was just another officer clinging to duty. No one saw the storm boiling behind his eyes. He marched past the lobby and into the records wing, empty at this hour. There, he plugged the flash drive into a terminal, pulling up the frozen image of Julian, the mayor's bodyguard, and Rowan in the alley. His hands hovered over the keyboard. He could send this to every press outlet, every newsroom, every corner of the internet in seconds. But he didn't press enter. Not yet, because exposing them wasn't enough. Not after what they had done to Adrian. The sound of footsteps pulled him back. Heavy, confident. Marcus turned, hand on his sidearm. Rowan Kalin stepped into the room, trench coat draped over his shoulders, a calm smile tugging at his lips. I knew you couldn't resist, Marcus. Marcus's jaw tightened. You were there. I have you on tape. Holding him down while Julian stabbed him. Rowan chuckled softly, shaking his head. You think grainy footage will matter? The mayor owns every judge, every headline. That drive is worthless. Marcus took a step forward, rage flickering in his eyes. Then why are you here? If it's worthless, why are you so afraid of me pressing enter? Rowan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then he sighed, as though speaking to a stubborn child. Because you don't get it, Marcus. This isn't about truth. It's about power. And you don't have any. Marcus drew his weapon, the barrel leveled squarely at Rowan's chest. The detective froze, eyes narrowing. You were supposed to be his godfather, Marcus growled. His voice cracked with grief. You held Adrian as a baby, and you held him again the night he died. Tell me, how did you live with that? For the first time, Rowan's composure slipped. His jaw clenched, his eyes hardening. Because it was survival. Julian would have slit my throat if I hadn't helped. The mayor gave me a choice, stand with them or disappear. And I chose to live. Marcus's stomach twisted. The truth was worse than he imagined. Not just betrayal, but betrayal by a man he once trusted like family. The tension snapped. Rowan lunged, knocking the barrel aside as the gun went off, echoing through the empty hall. The two men grappled, crashing into desks and filing cabinets. Papers scattered, lights flickered. Marcus fought like a man possessed, fists fueled by rage and grief. Rowan was strong, but Marcus's fury gave him the edge. He pinned Rowan against the wall, gun pressed under his chin. The detective's voice was calm, almost mocking. You pull that trigger, Marcus, and you'll prove them right. A dirty cop, unhinged, out for blood. They'll bury you and Adrian's name both. Marcus's finger trembled on the trigger. His chest heaved. Rowan's words sank like poison, because he knew they were true. Killing Rowan here would hand the Drevens exactly what they wanted. For a long, agonizing moment, the two men locked eyes, predator and prey, though it was impossible to tell which was which. Then Marcus shoved Rowan back, keeping the gun trained on him. No, he said, his voice low, steady. You don't get to control this anymore. I'll burn your world down piece by piece. And I'll start with your mayor. He grabbed the flash drive, yanked it from the terminal, and stormed out, leaving Rowan standing in the wreckage of scattered papers. For the first time, Marcus felt in control. Not because he had won, but because he had chosen not to play Rowan's game. But as he stepped into the night air, a chill crept down his spine. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of war. The rain had returned by morning, pounding the streets like war drums. Marcus Vaynar hadn't slept. His body ached from the fight with Rowan, but his mind burned with a single thought: expose them. All of them. He drove across the city in silence, the flash drive clutched in his pocket. He wasn't heading to the precinct. Not anymore. He was done begging the system to deliver justice. Instead, he pulled up outside the office of the Herald, the city's most stubbornly independent newspaper. Inside, the place smelled of ink and stale coffee. Desks were cluttered with papers. Phones rang constantly. Marcus walked straight to the editor's office. Ellen Harker, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, looked up from behind her glasses as he dropped the flash drive on her desk. "You want a story?" Marcus said, his voice low but steady. "Here's the biggest one this city's ever seen. Mayor Dreven's son murdered my boy, and the detective who was supposed to investigate helped cover it up." Ellen studied him, then the flash drive. "If this is true, it's true." Marcus leaned closer, his eyes blazing. "And if you sit on it, you're no better than them." Ellen's jaw tightened. She slid the drive into her computer. Grainy footage filled the screen. Julian Dreven, the bodyguard, Rowan Kalin. Ellen's face paled. She leaned back in her chair. "Do you have any idea what you brought to my doorstep? The mayor controls half this city." Marcus's voice cracked, grief and fury mingling. "He doesn't control me." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Ellen nodded. "We'll run it. But you need to understand, once this goes public, they'll come for you harder than ever." Marcus gave a bitter smile. "They already have." By nightfall, the footage leaked across every local outlet. The story spread like fire. Whispers in bars, shouts on street corners, headlines screaming about the mayor's son and the cover-up. But victory was short-lived. As Marcus returned home, he saw the glow from two black SUVs idling outside his house. His stomach dropped. He drew his weapon and slipped in through the back. The house was dark, too quiet. Then he saw it. The living room window shattered, rain blowing in. On the floor, Adrian's photograph again, this time burned at the edges. A voice came from the shadows. "You should have listened, Marcus." Rowan stepped forward, calm, trench coat dripping from the rain. Behind him, two men in suits blocked the doorway, guns in hand. Marcus raised his weapon, his chest heaving. "You think killing me will stop this? The story's already out." Rowan's smirk didn't falter. "Stories fade. People get scared. Reporters backtrack. But you? You're permanent. If you vanish, so does the fight." The men flanked him, their weapons trained. Marcus's heart raced, but his grip didn't waver. "I won't vanish," Marcus said. His voice was steady, almost calm. "Not before you do." In a single motion, Marcus flipped the coffee table for cover as gunfire erupted. Bullets ripped through the walls, glass shattered. Marcus fired back, his shots precise, fueled by grief. One of the suited men went down with a cry, clutching his chest. The other retreated to the doorway, firing blindly. Rowan ducked behind the couch, his laughter echoing through the chaos. "You can't win, Marcus. You're one man against an empire." Marcus's teeth clenched as he reloaded. "Then I'll tear it down brick by brick." The firefight raged until sirens wailed in the distance. Rowan cursed under his breath, signaling the surviving bodyguard to retreat. Before slipping out the shattered door, Rowan locked eyes with Marcus. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You've declared war, and wars don't end clean." Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. Marcus slumped against the wall, his chest heaving, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. The sirens grew louder, closer. He knew the Drevens would spin the story, twist the truth, use every ounce of their power to crush him. But for the first time since Adrian's death, Marcus felt something new. Not just rage, not just grief. Hope. Because now the world knew the Dreven's secret, and Marcus was still alive to finish what he started. The city had erupted. By morning, news outlets replayed the leaked footage on a loop. Commentators argued, protesters gathered outside City Hall, and the Dreven name no longer carried invincibility. It carried scandal. But Marcus Vaynar knew the Drevens wouldn't fall so easily. Corruption ran deeper than headlines. And Rowan Kalin was still out there, weaving his lies like a spider. Marcus stood in the rain-soaked cemetery, his hand resting on Adrian's headstone. He hadn't been able to give his son the funeral he deserved. Not yet. But he whispered anyway. "I promised you I'd make them pay. Tonight, I keep that promise." That night, Marcus moved like a shadow through the abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. He had followed Rowan's trail here, a final meeting place, whispered about in intercepted calls. Inside, the flicker of lanterns revealed armed men and a long table where Mayor Corvin Dreven sat, his son Julian smirking at his side. Rowan stood near them, trench coat draped, eyes sharp. Marcus stepped from the shadows, rifle raised. Game's over. The room erupted in motion, guns drawn, chairs scraping. But Mayor Dreven lifted a hand. The men froze. The mayor leaned forward, his voice calm, smug. You've caused me trouble, Officer Vaynar. But trouble can be erased. Just like your son. Julian chuckled, leaning back in his chair. He begged, said he'd pay if I let him walk. Weak. Marcus's blood boiled. He steadied his rifle, ready to end Julian right there. But Rowan spoke first. Marcus, don't be the fool they want you to be. Shoot him, and you'll be painted a murderer. Let me handle this. You can still walk away. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Walk away? Like you did that night. Rowan stiffened, but the mayor smirked. You really think Rowan betrayed you? No, Marcus. He was my insurance. He kept Julian from going too far. Your boy's death was a mistake. A fight gone wrong. Marcus's heart pounded. The mayor's words dripped with manipulation, but something about Rowan's silence gnawed at him. Then the twist unraveled. Rowan finally spoke, his voice cold, steady. It wasn't Julian who ordered Adrian's death. It was the mayor. He wanted leverage on you, Marcus. A loyal cop who'd break under grief. Julian was just the blade. I was the hand that held it steady. The room stilled. Even Julian's smirk faltered. Marcus's chest constricted, his breath ragged. All this time, he had seen Rowan as weak, a coward bending to power. But the truth was worse. Rowan hadn't been forced. He had chosen. You were my brother, Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. And you killed my son. Rowan's eyes were unreadable. I survived. Rage ignited like fire through Marcus's veins. In one motion, he fired. The shot echoed like thunder, slamming Rowan to the ground. Chaos exploded. Bullets flew, men shouting. Marcus dove for cover, firing with precision, his grief guiding every pull of the trigger. Julian tried to flee toward the back, but Marcus caught him. A shot to the leg sent him sprawling. Marcus stood over him, rifle trained on the boy who had stolen his world. Julian's arrogance cracked. He crawled backward, blood soaking his trousers. My father, he'll protect me. Marcus's voice was ice. Not anymore. One final shot ended Julian Dreven's smirk forever. The remaining bodyguards scattered as sirens wailed in the distance. The mayor, pale and trembling, sank into his chair, his empire collapsing around him. Marcus lowered his weapon, his body shaking, adrenaline crashing through him. He turned toward Rowan's lifeless body, lying in a pool of rainwater seeping through the roof. For a moment, Marcus felt nothing. No victory, no relief, just the hollow silence of a promise kept. When the police stormed the factory minutes later, Marcus dropped his rifle and raised his hands. He didn't resist. He didn't need to. The story was already written. As they cuffed him, Marcus glanced once more at the night sky, whispering to Adrian's memory. I wasn't going to your funeral, son. I was going to erase their bloodline. And I did. The city would remember Marcus Vaynar not as a grieving father, not as a cop, but as the man who shattered the Dreven dynasty.